Here comes the, y'all don't really want it like that. Yeah. Here comes the, no. Here comes the, oh. Here comes the, y'all don't really want it like that. Yeah.
Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video, and today we're going to be going over my guide to Nell. Now, I was given early access to Season 3 thanks to the devs. Unfortunately, I only got to play for like 5 hours because I got back from Battlefield 6 and then I only had a few hours to play this. And the main thing I wanted to focus in on was Nell, and she functions entirely different than how I thought. I thought she was pretty mid, to be honest with you, in the little Season 3 demo that they did, and I was planning on building her as a non-crit fusion Descendant. That's just entirely wrong. Her Transcendent module completely changes the way that you build her, and I think it's her best build. And so I want to break down everything that I've learned, because what I was saying in, like, streams and stuff was like, you should get non-attribute fusion, and that's the way you're just going to get built. I was totally wrong. She is going to be crit tech, and her build that is crit tech focused is freaking gnarly. It does a ton of damage. She is, like, competing, in my opinion, with Viessa for, like, just the amount of burst damage that she can do. It's kind of disgusting. So I hope you guys enjoy the breakdown. Let's get right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is this Shattered Heart Transcendent module. Now, this says it changes Gaze of the Abyss to an attack skill, builds up suspension stacks using breach spikes, then fire enhanced breach spikes. Now, when I first used this module, I thought it was completely broken. I just didn't understand what I was doing wrong, and I will show you that real quick. So these are the enemies. I can't use my third or fourth ability right now. So if we, like, use my first ability, it says I need to use my first to build up stacks of my fourth. And as you can see, nothing is happening. We are not building up any stacks. And the reason for that is they have to be scanned. If her kit, like, functions entirely off if you scan the enemies or not. So now that these enemies are scanned, now you can see my custom resources fully built up, and now I can use my fourth. However, while her fourth is, like, her biggest burst, her one hits ridiculously hard. Just to give you an idea, let's group up these guys. Already, right there, are, like, max DPS was 60 million. And then watch what happens when I cast this one through enemies. Now my max DPS is 705 million. Her one hits so hard. Look at all that damage, and it's spammable. And then her fourth also hits really, really hard, but it's more of like a single target ability. It will absolutely burst down elites, but because her one and her fourth are, like, very limited AoE, you really have to be able to use your two to group up enemies. Your two and your three will group up enemies for you, and then you can just shoot your, like, one and four through them. And that's where a lot of her damage is coming from. Right there, you saw that we hit 984 million DPS. And, like, I don't have a lot of things that I would need for her. For example, they added these, like, new trigger modules, and we'll talk about that in a second. I haven't had a chance to farm one for this specific build. But yeah, Nell is crazy. So I know we just kind of did that demonstration, but just to give you, like, a brief overview. So basically, you get 2 stacks of her one ability, which you can fire out. It does 3 projectiles, and that does skill power. However, if you have a scan target, you get 100% additional damage, and you get additional burst damage, and you get more range. And this range is not something that you can, like, build range for example. So for example, it like, if I use my one here down the middle, you'll see that it doesn't hit the enemies to the side. And now if I use my one, now you'll see it's hitting the whole group. So you really want to make sure that enemies are scanned, because it'll get that range that, like, it doesn't really benefit from range up until you scan, and then all of a sudden all your range stuff benefits it, which is awesome. Her 2 is going to create a gravity field that reduces enemies' movement speed, increases their weak point damage. It's 300% max expandable range. The build that I'm going to be showing off right now is mainly what I run for, like, Void Erosion. We'll talk about what you can change for, like, normal mobbing. But enemies are going to be taking continuous damage. It's kind of like a ground dot almost, because it ticks every 0.5 seconds. And then if you explode this, you get a big burst of damage. You also get a cooldown, a decrease, and a movement speed increase, which is really, really nice. So, like, here is my movement speed right now. And if we do this and then blow it up, I get a big movement speed increase, which is really, really nice. But the big downside of detonating it like that is you don't get the group. But you can use it to just, like, explode enemies. Then her next ability, her third, is the group. You can only use it if the 2 is active. It will explode the 2 and do a bunch of damage. However, if you click this, for example, and then... Oh, whoops, sorry. If you click this and then detonate, you don't get the movement speed increase. So you only get the movement speed increase and the cooldown if you actually detonate the 2 manually without the pull. There, you'll see. Now we're zooming. So there's kind of like a use case scenario for when to actually use this and when not to. I do like detonating it, mainly for the grouping, so that the 1 and 4 hits really hard. This build that we're going to go over is mainly for Void Erosion. But that's, you know, kind of understanding her kit is if you need the movement speed boost, you just put out the 2 and then blast it. If you need the grouping, then you use the 3. And then lastly, the 4th ability with Shattered Heart is going to give you this big projectiles that hit everything. And once again, if a target is scanned, it does 100% additional damage. And with the Shattered Heart, the thing that makes her a crit Descendant is you just get skill critical hit rate plus 20%. So you get base 20% skill critical hit rate just equipping this thing, which is gnarly. So right now you'll see that I have 68% like skill critical hit rate. If we take this off, now you'll see that I have 13%. So just equipping this turns her into a crit Descendant, kind of regardless of how you want to use it. And then with our setup, I'm going to be using a Blue Beetle Scout Rifle. And with the Blue Beetle, her 1 and 2 are fusion abilities. So we are getting up to 97% critical hit rate. We'll talk about why I don't have that at 100%. But basically, you're getting all of your attacks critting for the most part, which is really, really nice. And then also, if you do scan things with her passive, you get additional range and skill power damage on hitting scanned targets. So, like, for example, her 1 hits particularly so hard because you're going to get that, like, additional skill power damage on scanned targets, and you get the additional damage, and you get the burst damage, and you get the default damage, and you get the extra range. It's just really gnarly. So Nell is a new Descendant, so we're going to go one mod at a time. Just explain the difference between the Void Erosion and the mobbing build, because they're pretty similar. But we've got a bunch of base critical hit, so we're going to build into critical hit pretty heavily. We're going to go skill insight for the critical hit rate increase, skill concentration for the more skill crit damage, and then front lines. Now, these 3 mods together get us to 97% critical hit rate. If we were to use emergency measures, we actually only get down to like 84%. If we were to like swap skill insight for emergency measures, it's more damage with skill insight than emergency here. And if we use emergency measures, we do get a little bit more damage, but I actually opted for some quality of life for me personally, which we'll talk about in a second. So that's going to cover our crit modules. Then for HP, we're going to slap on increased HP. You could use HP amp if you want. I just use the blue HP. And then we want cooldown. Nell is one of the most skill spammy Descendants of the skill spam Descendants. So we're going to use Nimble and MP Conversion. We want to make sure that her cooldowns are always up. She does have 300% expandable range, which means that with her Arche Tuning board, in order to get max range, we would want skill expansion and you can get max range with a amplification control. This gives us another 51% range. However, I find that's not really needed for Void Erosion. Personally, Void Erosion, the enemies are pretty grouped up, and that's kind of the big difference between mobbing and Void Erosion. Void Erosion, we don't need that extra range because enemies are already pretty close. And so on that, because she's so spammy and I never want to run out of mana, I actually use a maximize conservation here. I'd prefer that over like an MP collector or anything. When I was doing some runs without this, I was actually running out of mana and having to like make sure I was picking some up. But I do want to point out that like for example, the sets that I've been running and the things that they gave us don't have like all of the things that I would normally have on my components. For example, when I ran the Enlightened Mage set, there's no like passive MP recovery. And when I was running this new set, which is really sick, a Dimension Destroyer, which we'll talk about in a second, this also didn't have any max MP on it. So like I made the best build with what the things I had. But for example, if you have really good components, you might not need maximized conservation, but it is massive quality of life for her. And then the last thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing on non-attribute and tech. So we just go focus on non-attribute and tech here. Then we're going to go focus non-attribute, focus on tech. And that is the build. And then for mobbing, it's going to be very similar, but we're going to swap out the maximize conservation for amplification controls so we can get that more max expandable range. And now we've got a much, much, much bigger circle to explode. And before, for like Void Erosion, we're very much focusing on our single target, which is our 1 and our 4. For mobbing, most things are going to die to your 2 spam and your 2-3 combo. And so we're actually going to swap our focus on tech to focus on fusion. So here is the mobbing build. Pause so you can screenshot it. And here is the like Void Erosion build. Pretty much the same, just we're focusing on 2 different skills for them. And so, for example, our reactor is going to change from a fusion reactor for mobbing to a tech reactor for bossing. For your components, it's a bit of an interesting one. I'm just going to show you the test. So this is the Enlightened Mage, which gives her non-attribute power. We're going to use this ability 3 times. So we get the like Enlightened Mage stacks, and we're going to detonate. There you see that we did 84 million damage. Now we're going to swap out our components for this new set, the Dimension Destroyer. Let's set these. These we need to get stacks, and then at 10 stacks we will get this special ability. So there's the 10 stacks. Let's cast this. Detonate. We should get some meteors. And you will see that without the stacks, or like in comparison, we did more damage with the like Enlightened Mage over the Dimension set. But the Dimension set's really freaking cool, and it'll constantly call down meteors. I do need to do some like more testing over like a duration. But I do think the Enlightened Mage slightly wins out. But if you want to use this Dimension set, it's freaking sick, because it'll just like call down meteors from the sky, which do damage and can crit. So really, really cool. The choice is going to be up to you. For your weapon, definitely need to run the Blue Beetle. The fusion skills are going to give us the massive crit boost. If you did not know, the fusion or the like fusion buff on the Blue Beetle gives us 115% increased skill critical hit rate, which is ridiculous, and it lasts 10 seconds, so it's basically up 100% of the time. What you use doesn't really matter. You're not going to shoot this thing on her. Just make sure that you throw some sprint speed cores on her. She can get up to like 1,400 sprint speed when she spams her 2, so that's really quite nice. And then for the reactor, I just had to use the reactors that they gave me. This isn't like my account, but I would recommend for both her like fusion reactor and her tech reactor to go for skill critical hit damage and cooldown. I think that's going to be your god roll on both fusion and on tech. For the Arche Tuning, I was using Focus Boost. When you defeat an enemy, you get skill cost. I was using Neurostimulation for the bump of MP that you can get, and also Deploy Hardened Shell for the reduction in incoming damage. I did not use this Deploy Resonance device, which gives us extra duration and weak point damage. I think this is going to be more for her gun build. We don't really benefit from duration because we're detonating everything immediately, and the more weak point damage doesn't do anything for us either. So that's why I'm not using this like Nell specific buff. And this is what her Arche Tuning board looks like. I was having MP issues, so I went for the more enhanced MP recovery. But once again, like my components aren't fully set. They're like missing MP rolls. So if you don't need this, you just go for the more HP and you'll be fine. and then we grab all of the skill critical hit rates, skill damage. I throw non-attribute cohesion here for the extra stacking non-attribute skill power. And then the cooldown here is like so important. She really, really wants this. This is like the #1 priority to get on her. Before we move on, I do want to mention that I used this Void Erosion build on Nell to kill the like new Abyss boss, Hangedman, the like Storm Hangman. I tried the fight on Serena and I tried it on Freyna, and I actually got my fastest kill with Nell using ability spam, particularly spamming her 1, just keeping it up and keeping Hangman scanned. It doesn't look like I have footage of it. So I guess you're just going to take my word for it. When the season launches, I'll get gameplay of it. But Nell gave me my personal fastest kill time on the new like Abyss Hangman. Now for the gun build for Nell, it functions very differently. Personally, I much prefer her ability-based build over her gun build, but I wanted to talk about her gun build as well because it's definitely very interesting. If you don't know what I'm referencing, basically Nell's 4th ability, if you're not using a Transcendent module, gives you Gaze of the Abyss. This gives you a weak point damage increase, but more importantly, all firearm attacks hit weak points. So if you're shooting a monster in the toe, it'll still weak point. However, it's important to know that all firearm effects do not actually benefit from this. As in, like, for example, if you're shooting a Malevolent into a crowd, the first hit will guarantee weak point, but all of the bladed cogs will not weak point. The Perforator, when you shoot that, you'll hit a weak point, triggering all of the explosions, but all of the explosions won't weak point. So only your initial hit is benefiting from the weak point increase. Personally, I think this would be a lot stronger if all of the hits benefited from the weak point increase, but it's still pretty solid. The big kicker here is Gaze of the Abyss is one of the few abilities in the game that doesn't go on cooldown until it's actually over, making it impossible to have 100% uptime. So we're going to be using things like Veteran Tactics. When defeating an enemy, reset the cooldown of a random skill at a 19% chance with a 5-second cooldown. This will give us better uptime on Gaze of the Abyss. The other thing to note about this build, and this is kind of up to you, is I'm currently not using duration on the build. And the reason for that is because if we put on like skill extension here, skill extension only extends the base duration of Gaze of the Abyss, but it doesn't extend the max Gaze of the Abyss duration increase. And whenever you kill an enemy with while they're scanned, and whenever you hit an enemy with your 1 while they're scanned, you get more duration. And so regardless of if you build duration or not, you're still gonna get to that like max gaze duration. So it's still nice quality of life because your base duration will be higher. But I didn't find duration to be all that important. Definitely like just something you can mess around with. Instead of building duration, I use maximize conservation so that I could have like, more spam on all of my skills. So I could spam those breach shards more if I needed them for more uptime. But for the build, we're going to be using focus on non-attribute and focus on fusion. These are just for cooldown. We're going to be putting down your like your second ability and leaving it here. You don't actually need to like group up enemies. You can if you'd like to, but while those enemies are getting hit, they're going to getting a stacking weak point damage increase and a movement speed reduction. So they're going to be kind of like frozen, and you're going to deal more weak point damage to them. So that's kind of why I'm not exploding the two all that often. And then we're going to be using conservation so that we don't run out of mana. Shot focus for more gun damage, veteran tactics to reset the 4th ability, MP conversion and nimble for more cooldown, and then I'm using skill expansion and maximize range. You could get away with an amplification here if you wanted to, but because we're not speccing into the percent range increase, maximize range is actually kind of nice. We don't really care about our skill damage here. Basically, we just want as many enemies to be in R2 as possible, and that is kind of the gun build. Once again, if you're not feeling like you are having mana issues, you could just use duration. Once again, I was having mana issues because most of the things that I was using didn't have like good MP rolls. For the external components, I was messing around with this like a weak point ricochet set. The thing is with this is it's like seems pretty cool. You get the weak point damage increase and you get the damage to nearby monsters. However, it looks like only one of it comes with actual HP. However, I think it's probably a bug. All of the components that they gave us were double HP rolled. And so even though only one of these rolled with HP, I still got to 18,000 HP. And like HP wasn't an issue. When the game actually goes live, it might be a little bit more risky to run something like this. And in that case, you would run 2-piece Shell Crusher, 2-piece Ballistic. So you get that weak point and the firearm attack. But I was using the 4-piece Ballistic for the extra ricochets. And then for guns, I mainly was rocking the Malevolent and the Perforator. The Malevolent gets additional bladed cogs when you weak point, so that's really nice. And the Perforator sends out explosions. The Reactor doesn't really matter. Just look for skill cooldown is kind of like the main thing. And skill cost would also be really nice. For the Malevolent build, this is what I was rocking. We go into a bunch of extra weak point with weak point, have aiming, and overwhelm. I went for some extra quality of life with the extra mag size, chill enhancement, chill priority, charge amp, action reaction, and fire rate. And then for the like actual things, I had chill attack, firearm, chill, fire rate, firearm attack, rounds per mag, weak point damage, and chill attack. You'd probably want to change the rounds per mag for like a faction bonus, to be honest. But yeah, that was the Malevolent build. And for the Perforator, I was using chill, firearm critical hit rate, fire rate, and then your like damage to the Legion of Darkness with firearm attack, crit rate, crit damage, and Legion of Darkness. This was the Perforator build that I was rocking for a ton of weak point damage. This gets us to a 10x weak point multiplier with have aiming, weak point, spite, and special sight, with rifle, better concentration, better insight, fire rate up, and bullet integration. The gun Arche Tuning board, it kind of depends on what weapon you want to use. If you're going to be using like a crit gun, you're going to want to go grab the like crit damage and crit rate increases. If you're using a multi-hit weapon, you would just take this branch, and instead of going up here, you just go down here and grab the like multi-hit, multi-chance. But the big thing is that we're going to be using defense neutralization. Now, normally we don't use this on non-attribute Descendants because non-attribute abilities do not benefit from the defense stripping or the resistance stripping. However, Nell is a non-attribute Descendant who is going to be using guns, and her guns will benefit from both the defense stripping and the resistance stripping. So this is a massive damage multiplier for her, especially against all of the enemies in Axion Plains. I'll like build up some resistances to you. So this is super, super awesome. We're also going to grab the cooldown so we get more uptime on the 4th ability. And then we could grab some more like advantage affinity damage, crit chance, crit damage. So this feels really, really good. And once again, if you're using a multi-hit weapon, you would just move this down and grab like the reload speed and the multi-hit chance and damage and the enhanced multi-hit. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I will have more like season 3 videos. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I will have more season 3 like builds and guides on the way. I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. Nell is stronger of an ability character than I thought she would be, but she's a bit weaker in the like gun builds than I was hoping she would be. And once again, like this is me off of like 5 hours of playtesting. So they're sure there's going to be more things that I find once I actually really get to sit down and grind this. So I will catch y'all on the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.